I'm Natalia Lobach, and this is Change Course. This is what change fatigue looks like. One of the challenges that I often encounter as a change leader is something called change fatigue. And this is typically understood as when teams who have been undergoing rapid, transformative, or very big change get tired, and really their capacity to absorb more change and to continue to be effective is limited. Change fatigue shows up as negative emotions and behaviors. So as we mentioned in one of the previous episodes where we talked about the journey through grief and the negative emotions that can come with that, we often see similar emotions at a state of change fatigue. So things like apathy and disengagement, avoidance and anger can show up. And you'll see a number of different behaviors that manifest those emotions. So things like not responding to calls to action, not wanting to engage, speak with a change leader, other things coming up and being a higher priority, other burning platform issues, making people want to take time away from the change. And I'm sure you have examples of your own that you see. So often the best response to a time like this is to, in fact, let off the gas pedal a little bit and give people the space to really sit with and acknowledge the change that they've gone through. And oftentimes I find that leaders are afraid to face the negative emotions again. Sometimes leaders think that, okay, we've already been through that. Why are we going through it again? And in fact, it's a different stage. It's a different phase. And we are human beings and we have, complicated and various emotional responses to things. And so having negative emotions at this stage is normal. And then also it's really important for leaders to acknowledge that and sit with that and help teams work through that. Sometimes change fatigue can also show up at the end of a period of change. And oftentimes there's a misalignment of expectation around the emotional state that we expect to see at the end of a period of change. Leaders expect that there might be a sense of relief, of happiness, accomplishment, celebration. And sometimes when people arrive at their destination, they're just tired. So in our modern world, we're 2 years into a global pandemic, and we've had a number of ups and downs and changes that have gone along with that. One of the interesting thinkers out there in the world is Cuddy. She has coined this term and defined this state of pandemic flux syndrome. And one of the key points that she makes is that when we get to the end of something or something that we think is the end, sometimes what shows up is emotions that we didn't expect. And I also see this in my change practice. So this is a really interesting way to look at change, and also something that we can relate to on a personal level because of where we are in the world today. So sometimes when we arrive at our destination, we don't feel relief. We don't feel happiness. We expect that we will. And that's where that conflict comes in. It's that misalignment of what we expect and what actually happens. So this is an important point for change leaders as well, because sometimes when we get to the end of that change, the response is fatigue. The response is apathy and disengagement. I just want to move on and do something else. And we expect that there's going to be jubilation, celebration, relief, happiness. And so in order to move to that place where we can really move into a more positive emotional state, it does also require that acknowledgement of where we are, the acknowledgement of the negative emotions. And as I've mentioned, this is difficult for leaders to face. What we're experiencing and feeling today, 2 years into a global pandemic, a new variant, all sorts of calls from officials and leaders to do things that we're tired of doing. This is what change fatigue looks like. This is what change fatigue feels like. And so this is an opportunity for you as a change leader to really sit in this discomfort and sit in this place and apply this to when you return to that leadership position, that change leadership focus, and understand that these are those heavy emotions and that heavy fatigue that people are feeling when they're faced with prolonged, difficult change. So I'd encourage you to learn from this experience and develop that sense of empathy around how teams feel during a period of change fatigue. The third thing I'm going to talk about is how we think about moving through a period of change fatigue and how we prepare for it. So we always go into change thinking we're not going to hit these roadblocks, and we inevitably do. One of the key things that we need to think about as we are preparing for change and moving through the change process is always communicating from a place of purpose in terms of where the change is going, what our desired outcomes are, and what we need to do to get there. The second piece is we also need to have acknowledgement along the way of how far we've come. The third piece is we actually need to continue to communicate about new information and changes in the environment as we're moving forward that could have an effect on either a final destination or different factors related to the change. These three things are what we need to consider as we're preparing our teams to move through a period of fatigue. And often change efforts and leaders only focus on the first one, which is where are we going? How do we get there? What do we need to do? And the other two pieces are really important in, first of all, establishing a sense of accomplishment and completion at different points of the change journey. And third, communicating those pieces of information that might require further change, prolonged change, adjustments during the journey. And often it's this constant adjustment, constant recalibration that is so fatiguing. And so putting that communication and peppering those messages throughout is actually a way to help prevent and also improve the responses to change fatigue. So where do we go from here? We're fatigued. Maybe your engagement or your effort is experiencing a high degree of change fatigue. Well, the best thing to do when you hit this roadblock is to take that foot off the gas pedal, to really stop for a little bit, pause, acknowledge the emotions, sit with them. Also acknowledge how far the team has come and everything that they've accomplished. And before you start on the messaging of, there's still so far to go, we haven't made it, there's so much more on our journey to come, those types of messages, sit and acknowledge and listen. We have to recalibrate and go back to listening. So often in change, we're focused on responding to problems, addressing issues. And this is a normal place to be in an agile and flexible change effort, where we want to be able to reduce risk. We want to continue to move forward effectively and not let those roadblocks get in our way. But change fatigue is not a roadblock that we can solution. In fact, the best solution is to sit back, listen, and not offer problem solving, not offer solutions. Let the air out of the tires a little bit. Let people vent their frustration if they must. And then once that period is over, and this is where instinct plays a big role, because you don't want to move into backsliding into, the previous way of doing things. You want this to be a pause, not a place where people turn back and return to the old way. So that instinct and that art versus science is actually very important here for a change leader. So knowing when we can reset, when we can stop the pause and move forward is really important. So for all of you change leaders out there, this is what I think you can ponder as we move forward this period of change fatigue in our modern lives. And I hope that this has been a helpful reflection on change fatigue and what we're feeling right now, and how we can learn from this and apply it to our work going forward. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes on how to change course.